So we've covered our cake and it's still soft. As quickly as possible to do the decorations that I'm going to use on this. I'm going to put patchwork cutters top on and a crimped side. So we're going to start with the patchwork cutters. Now the best thing to do, unless you're really good, is to just plan out your top onto a board first and decide how you want to lay it out, because that way you're less likely to make mistakes when you come to do the actual cake. And then you can just transfer it straight onto the cake. Start by just laying them very carefully, because again this way you're less likely to make mistakes. Now I'm doing Annie, which has two ends, so I'm leaving a gap for the other end to go into. And we've got a nice poppy cutter, and we're going to put a butterfly on it, but he's going to be freestanding, so we'll deal with him shortly. So first off, firmly press the poppy cutter into the top of the cake, and then your inscription. There we have the design. Now we're going to leave that to set up before we do anything else with it, but eventually what we will do is paint the inscription and put a layered design on to show you how to build this poppy up into a nice flower. And the little butterfly, we'll just finish it off in the corner. Now the poppy cutter is patchwork, it just comes as it is, and the letters I'm using are actually the Patchwork cutter's capital easy twist letters, so you can use these individually, which is great for embossing. And the little butterfly is one of the many out of the Butterflies, Ladybirds and Bees set, which I find is a fantastic set for lots of little extras that you want to do, as well as using it as a set in its own right. For the freestanding patchwork we're going to put on our cake, we're going to use a little butterfly and the bows for the side. The butterfly from the Butterfly, Ladybirds and Bees kit, and the bow comes in 3 sizes, so you can choose which one most suits your cake. Now you need Mexican paste. Don't try and do these cutters with ordinary sugar paste, because you'll just find that it sticks in. It's far too soft and does not roll thinly enough for it. Another invaluable item is the Trex white fat. Without that, that's the other thing that stops your cutters from sticking. It's also very useful for cleaning your boards. That will also make your non-stick board much more non-stick. So rub it in and it'll clean off any dirt that was on it. Don't leave any visible fat, but that slight greasing that you've got there is enough to give you a nice non-stick finish. Take a piece of the Mexican paste, and I always find it's useful to have a little bit of white fat on my hands, because that also greases the paste, and knead it through so that you don't get any cracking. It just needs to be nice and smooth, and then roll it out on your non-stick board using a non-stick rolling pin if you can. It will be so much easier. There are certain times when the right tools do help. If you don't have one of these non-stick boards, the Cell Cakes one is great, or you can in fact use a melamine table mat, but one without any pattern on I would recommend, otherwise you can't really see what you're doing. Now you want this to be nice and fine, and to leave it so that it is sticking to your board don't loosen it before you do your cutting because it stays firmer. Because it's quite stretchy paste, if you loosen it and then you mess with the cutter, you can put it out of shape. Now, a little bit of white fat, again, hardly anything. You don't want it clogging up all the detail, but just rub it over the surface of the cuts. And this bit is a bit of trial and error because the different patchwork cutters take different thicknesses of paste. The finer the detail, the finer the paste is going to have to be. So you do need to just check it out first. Press it down firmly around the edges because you want it to cut through on the edges, but you don't really want the middle to cut through. And once you've pressed it through, you can use your nail or a palette knife and just flick it off. And you can see all that nice detail, and that has cut through around the edges. Now leave that on the board for the moment and remove the excess. A scriber's quite good for this if there's small detail. But if you leave your item just for a few seconds on the board, it'll set up before you move it and it's less likely to stretch. And then lift it from the edges. We're going to set it so that it's looking like it's flying. So I've actually used one of our business cards, but you can use any bit of cardboard, and fold it to give a bit of lift. And that's going to be your former. And then just be very gentle with it and loosen it from your board. And lie that, come here, onto the former. And then you can leave that to set up until he's dry, and then he'll sit on the cake with his wings raised. Takes a good overnight, definitely, because with Mexican paste it's not the fastest drying paste and you do want it to be nice and firm before you use it. So I'm going to now use the bow cutter to cut out our bows for the sides. And exactly the same technique. Press round and flick it off. Again, try not to press too hard on the inside edges, otherwise you find that you get separated pieces. Because in that way, that's how you get the detail. But for this base coat, we don't want that. We just want an overall cut. And leave them all on the board. And while they're setting up, just remove the outside paste. This way as well, you don't waste paste because your excess paste isn't drying out. You can get it back into the bag. And these Squire's Kitchen Mexican paste ones come with a nice zippy top, so it keeps it good and airtight. Okay, so you've cut out your bows. Now the easiest way, because you've got a bit of white fat on here, it acts like a burnishing paste. A bit like the Guild Sol that Squire's makes, but it's a cheaper alternative. I'm using Sugar Flare Luster Colour. This one's Gold Sparkle, Pearl White. They do it in all sorts of different colours. This one is Radiant Gold, one of my personal favourites. I just tip it out into a little plastic pot because that's an easier way of using it. So, get a bit of sponge or kitchen paper and very carefully lift the bows from the board and transfer to dry. Be careful not to pull them apart, they are very delicate at this stage and they will separate into their different sections if you're not careful.